The mountain road had been empty 1 minute and full of white screaming chaos the next when Nathan Cole saw the fresh break in the guardrail. Below, a wedding car lay upside down in the ravine, ribbons snapping in the wind like torn prayer flags. His Belgian Malinois, Coddy, exploded from the truck before the engine even died, barking at a patch of crushed snow where a bride in a blood-stained gown was still breathing. She clutched Nathan's sleeve with freezing fingers and whispered the one sentence that changed everything. "My husband did this." Nathan had spent years hiding from the world in a cabin above the Wyoming tree line.
Can you stand?
But that night, the world rolled back to his doorstep in white satin and broken glass.
It's active.
What time are you watching from? Please like,
How is that
share,
possible?
and subscribe to K9 and Seal Stories.
We have to get out
and
of the
now,
open.
our story begins. Nathan Cole had chosen the mountain because the mountain never asked questions. He had bought the old timber cabin on the north side of the range after his final deployment, brought up tools, fuel, canned food, and the silence he thought would save him, and slowly built a life small enough that memory could fit inside it. He was in his early 30s, but grief had aged the edges of him. He kept his routine with military discipline. Supply run to town once every 10 days. Generator checks at dusk. Wood split before the weather turned. No wasted conversation. No visitors unless the weather or God forced them to his door. On the afternoon Elena Brooks married Adrian Vale, Nathan was driving home through rising snow with Coddy in the passenger seat, the dog's ears cutting toward every strange sound in the valley. Nathan had found Coddy after a difficult rescue placement through a veteran K9 program. The Malinois was lean, serious, mission-focused, and so attentive that Nathan sometimes felt as if the dog was the last witness to the man he used to be. By the time Nathan climbed the last switchback before the ridge road, the wedding convoy that had passed town earlier was nowhere in sight. What he saw instead was fresh black rubber on white snow, a fan of broken ice, and the ugly wound where a guardrail had been hit hard enough to burst outward over the ravine. He stopped so fast the truck fishtailed. Coddy hit the door before Nathan could unclip his seatbelt. The wind came up the gorge like a knife. Far below, through the blur of snow and distance, Nathan saw something pale caught in the rocks. He moved on instinct, dropping a rescue rope from his truck bed, anchoring it to the tow hook, and starting down the ravine with gloved hands and boots that barely held traction on the frozen slope. Coddy stayed above for 2 seconds, then found his own way down along a narrower cut in the rock, barking in short-clipped bursts that told Nathan the dog had human scent. The wrecked car had once been beautiful. Even upside down in the ravine, it still carried the remains of satin ribbons, white roses, and a just-married plate bent nearly in half. The windshield had shattered inward. One rear wheel spun uselessly. Nathan reached the driver's side first, saw no one there, then heard a ragged breath from the back. Elena Brooks was pinned under the twisted frame, half buried by the collapsed seat, her blonde bridal hair torn loose from its formal pins, one cheek bloodied, the right side of her gown soaked through by melt and mud. Her eyes opened when Coddy barked beside the door. Fear hit them first, then pain, then a kind of desperate relief. Nathan broke the remaining glass, cut through a jammed strap, and forced the frame wide enough to reach her. "Stay with me," he said. "Name." "Elena," she whispered. "My husband did this." Nathan's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. Training came back to him in clean, hard lines. Airway, breathing, pulse, bleeding, spinal risk, trapped leg. He worked without drama, using a pry bar from the truck kit, bracing the frame with the jack handle, then easing Elena free an inch at a time. Coddy ranged the ravine floor and came back twice, nose high, ears rigid, as if searching for another person who had already left. Once Elena was loose, Nathan wrapped her in the thermal blanket from his kit and checked her right leg. The knee was grotesquely unstable. He did not tell her how bad it looked. He lifted her instead, one arm behind her shoulders, one under her knees, and began the climb back up while snow thickened into a full mountain squall. Halfway to the truck, Elena drifted awake just enough to grab his jacket. "Don't take me back," she said. "Don't tell Adrian." "Then don't pass out yet," Nathan answered. "Save it for my cabin." He got her into the truck, blasted heat, and drove the last stretch by memory. The cabin sat alone among dark pines and granite, the only warm light on the ridge. He carried Elena inside, laid her on the long couch near the fire, then reached for the satellite phone. There were only a handful of people Nathan would call after dark. Dr. Hannah Moore was one of them. Hannah had worked emergency medicine in Casper before coming west for a quieter practice. She knew Nathan from the years after his discharge, when he had shown up half-broken, said almost nothing, and still managed to save a child from a flash flood without waiting for backup. She arrived an hour later in an old SUV that looked too civilized for the storm, medical bag in hand, scarf full of snow. She took one look at the gown, the bruising, the swelling in Elena's right leg, and said, "This is not a simple crash." Nathan told her what Elena had whispered. Hannah said nothing for a long moment. Then she got to work. She cut away what remained of the lower dress, immobilized the leg, stitched a deep laceration near the shoulder, warmed Elena slowly, and drew blood before the body metabolized whatever had dulled her reactions. Coddy lay by the hearth the entire time, head up, eyes fixed on Elena as if he understood that the woman in the torn satin had carried danger into the cabin with her. Around midnight, Elena woke hard, trying to sit up, panic flashing across her face when pain shot through her knee. Hannah steadied her and spoke in the calm voice of someone who had seen chaos before. "You're safe. For tonight, that has to be enough." Elena stared from Hannah to Nathan to Coddy and seemed to realize she had landed in a place stripped bare of performance. Rough timber walls, cast iron stove, mudroom boots, a seal who looked at problems the way other men looked at weather, a Malinois who never took his eyes off her. She began to cry without sound. Hannah checked the blood results just before dawn and felt the room change. Sedative traces. Not enough to knock Elena fully unconscious, but enough to slow her judgment, blur motion, and leave her helpless when the car began to move wrong. Nathan stood by the window staring into the dark trees while Hannah explained that the right leg had likely suffered major ligament damage and a complex knee injury. Surgery would help, but recovery would be long, uncertain, and painful. Elena turned her head toward the fire, toward the ruined hem of her gown, toward the wheelchair Hannah quietly admitted she would need for now. Nathan finally asked the only question that mattered. "If someone wanted you dead, how long before they realize you survived?" Elena looked at the black window and whispered, "By morning." Nathan watched snow fill the yard until the whole mountain disappeared. Then he checked the door, loaded fresh fuel into the generator, and knew his quiet life was gone. Morning came in gray layers. The storm had thinned, but the sky still held that iron color that promised more weather by afternoon. Nathan woke before first light, as always, and found Coddy sitting upright beside the couch, where Elena slept in fits. The dog did not wag his tail when Nathan approached. He only looked at him, then back at the woman, as if reporting the night had remained secure but unresolved. Hannah made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and turned on the small battery television in the kitchen for weather updates. Instead, they got the first local news bulletin. There on the screen stood Adrian Vale in a dark coat and measured grief, his hair perfect despite the weather, his jaw rigid in a way meant to read as heartbreak. He told the camera that his beloved wife, Elena Brooks, had been lost in a tragic mountain accident after their wedding, that search conditions remained dangerous, that the family requested privacy and prayer. Nathan watched Elena realize in real time that Adrian was not searching for her. He was burying her. By the time the second bulletin ran, the story had shifted. Financial commentators were already talking about the Brooks family trust, about temporary management, about Vale Industries stepping in to protect continuity. Elena did not cry that time. She only closed her eyes and said, "He's moving faster than I thought." Hannah helped her sit up and adjust the brace. The pain drained the color from Elena's face. Nathan leaned against the counter with his mug and waited. When Elena finally spoke, her voice no longer sounded like a bride rescued from a ravine. It sounded like a woman forced to say something humiliating out loud. Adrian had not come from old money, but he understood how to orbit it. He had been polished, ambitious, and almost aggressively attentive when they met. Elena had grown up in a world where every introduction seemed to contain a contract. Adrian seemed different because he knew how to imitate sincerity. He learned her schedule, remembered her father's favorite books, sent food to exhausted staff, charmed trustees, and never once raised his voice in public. The violence was subtler than fists. Isolation disguised as protection. Monitoring disguised as care. Legal language disguised as planning. Elena told them that during the 6 months before the wedding, Adrian pushed new financial structures through her office under the pretense of simplifying joint holdings. He had insisted on security upgrades, device monitoring, and a satellite emergency phone that supposedly existed for remote travel. The wedding route through the mountain pass had been his idea too, sold as a scenic drive to a private resort where photographers would meet them at sunset. "I thought he wanted a dramatic entrance," Elena said. "He wanted a controlled road." She remembered the moment the driver locked eyes with her in the rearview mirror. Not apologetic. Not surprised. Resolved. She remembered feeling heavy and slow, like her thoughts were moving through wet cement. She remembered trying the door handle and seeing the child lock light flash red. Then she remembered the car taking the turn too fast, the valley spinning sideways, and the violent disbelief of realizing death could arrive wearing wedding flowers. Nathan asked few questions, but every answer reorganized his understanding. Adrian was not improvising after a marital fight. Adrian had built a plan using image, money, and terrain. That made him dangerous in the way Nathan understood best. Patient, prepared, comfortable delegating harm. Hannah, more blunt, said what Elena could not. "If the public story is already that you're dead, then you're safer missing than found." Nathan turned off the television. "He'll want proof." That sentence changed the room. By noon, Nathan had transformed the cabin into something between a recovery shelter and a field position. He boarded the lower side windows, moved Elena into the bedroom farthest from the front wall, checked every blind spot on the property, and cut fresh tracks into the back tree line so anyone approaching would expose themselves in the snow. Coddy moved with him as if relieved to have a mission. The dog checked doors, paused at the generator shed, then circled back each time to Elena's room. At first, Elena looked uncomfortable under that unwavering canine attention. But by late afternoon, when Hannah stepped outside to take a private call and Nathan split wood near the shed, Coddy crossed the room and sat beside Elena's wheelchair without command. Elena hesitated, then let her hand rest on the Malinois' neck. Coddy remained still. It was the first sign of acceptance Nathan had seen from him toward a stranger in a very long time. Hannah stayed through the second night because the road back was bad and because she did not trust the timing. She also brought harder news. Elena would need formal imaging, orthopedic follow-up, and maybe surgery when movement was safe. But until then, she needed rest, bracing, compression, pain control, and absolute caution. Her right knee might heal enough for supported walking. It might never be fully stable again. Elena absorbed the words in silence. For a woman whose life had always been photographed upright, poised and composed, the wheelchair was not merely inconvenient. It was a public rewriting of identity. Nathan recognized that kind of loss, even if the shape was different. That evening, after Hannah fell asleep on the spare bunk and the fire settled into a low orange burn, Elena found Nathan at the kitchen table sharpening a utility knife with methodical calm. She asked why he lived that far from town, that far from people. He kept working for a few seconds before answering. "Noise," he said. "I got tired of everyone telling a cleaner version of things than the truth." Elena nodded slowly. "Then you must hate me." Nathan looked up. "You're hurt. Hating you would waste time." It was not comfort, but it was not rejection either. She told him she had spent years smiling at rooms full of people who wanted something from her, and had stopped knowing what genuine concern looked like. Nathan said, "Concern doesn't announce itself. It does the work and shuts up." That line stayed with her. Outside, the mountains settled under new snow. Inside, the cabin held 3 wounded people in different ways, and one dog who seemed to understand more than any of them. When Elena finally slept, Nathan stood alone at the window and watched the black ridgeline. Far down in the valley, lights moved along the county road. He did not know yet whether they belonged to plows, deputies, or men who had been told to search until they found a body. He only knew the rules had changed. By agreeing to let Elena remain, he had crossed a line he could not uncross. The mountain was no longer hiding him. It was hiding all of them. Nathan did not like waiting when a problem could be reduced by action. On the 3rd morning, he told Hannah to be ready by first light. If Adrian had staged the accident, then the ravine still held the kind of truth rich men usually missed because they believed money erased carelessness. Elena wanted to go, but Hannah shut that down immediately. The leg could not handle the road, much less the ravine. Elena argued anyway until Nathan said, "You want justice later? You let us do the work now." She hated how reasonable that sounded. Hannah stayed with her through the morning, checking circulation in the injured leg, changing dressings, and trying not to let her own anxiety show. Nathan and Coddy left just after dawn with ropes, tools, a compact lantern, an insulated evidence bag Hannah had packed, and the same grim focus Nathan once carried into missions that never made the news. At the crash site, the road already looked different. A county tow marker had been placed near the broken rail, but weather had kept full recovery crews from descending. That helped. Fresh snow also revealed something Nathan noticed immediately. Another set of boot prints near the edge, newer than the night of the crash, cut deep by a heavier man who had approached the ravine after the storm. Someone had come back to look. Coddy caught the scent and growled low in his throat. Nathan followed the prints to a place where the visitor had leaned out over the drop, then turned away fast. Either he had not gone down or he had run out of nerve. Nathan descended again, this time slower, studying every piece of metal, fabric, and glass. The wreck had shifted lower against a cluster of rocks. Inside, the front compartment was crushed almost flat on the passenger side. But under the driver console, Nathan found what the first searcher had missed. A small dash camera snapped from its mount, wedged beneath wiring and insulation. The housing was cracked. The memory card slot was bent. But the card was still inside. Hannah, waiting at the top, exhaled the first hopeful breath Nathan had heard from her since the rescue. Back at the cabin, they built a careful chain of handling, like people who knew better than to trust luck twice. Hannah dried the card, cleaned the pins, and used an adapter on her laptop, while Elena gripped the arms of her wheelchair so hard her knuckles whitened. The first attempt failed. The second returned corrupted blocks of static. On the third, fragments appeared: road, dashboard, the ghosted reflection of Elena's veil in the rear glass. Hannah froze the image, ran recovery software, and coaxed more frames into sequence. When the final minutes assembled, the room went dead quiet. The footage showed the wedding car climbing the pass. It showed Milo Greer's hands on the wheel. It showed Elena leaning forward, confused and already slowed by the sedative. Then, in one brief, terrifying moment at a pullout before the fatal curve, another vehicle came into frame through the side mirror. Adrian's SUV. He had pulled parallel for just seconds, long enough to appear in the camera's field, long enough to raise his hand near the window with something small and black in his palm. A remote. The next second, the car's steering jolted violently and the feed lurched into chaos. Elena covered her mouth. Hannah whispered an oath. Nathan did not speak at all. He copied the files to 3 encrypted drives and hid them in separate places around the cabin. That night, Adrian escalated. Nathan sensed it before he saw it. Coddy woke from dead sleep at 1:13 a.m. Head lifting, body already rigid. No bark, just alert stillness. Nathan was out of bed before the dog reached the door. Headlights moved through the trees below the property line, too controlled to be lost, too late to be innocent. Nathan killed the lamps, rolled Elena's chair into the back room, and told Hannah to stay with her. Then he and Coddy took the side exit and moved through the snow behind the woodshed, where the moon gave them enough light to work without flashlights. 2 men came uphill from the tree line. Not locals. They moved wrong for mountain weather. Good boots, but bad pacing. Expensive thermal gear. No respect for ice. Hired hands. They had pistols Nathan never gave them the chance to use properly. The first went down hard when Coddy hit his forearm from the dark and spun him into the snow. The second fired wild, the shot cracking through the trees, and Nathan drove him into the side of the shed before wrenching the weapon free. The fight lasted maybe 20 seconds. The first man fled, bleeding into the timber. The second took one good look at Nathan's face, at Coddy braced beside him, and decided retreat was the better career choice. He ran downhill, leaving tracks clear as confession. Nathan did not chase. He brought the dropped phone inside instead. It was a prepaid burner with only 2 recent messages, both from a number without a name. One read, "Confirm target before sunrise. No witnesses." Elena read it twice and went pale in a way pain alone had not caused. She had known Adrian wanted her gone. Seeing hired violence written down made the truth less psychological and more practical. Adrian was now paying men to cross dark woods in winter and kill strangers in a cabin. Sheriff Leah Carter entered the story the next day because Hannah insisted someone in county law had to be tested. Leah had grown up 2 valleys over, had a reputation for saying less than she knew, and had once treated Nathan fairly when a town deputy mistook reserve for arrogance. Nathan arranged the meeting in a county maintenance garage rather than the station. He brought no files, only one small copied frame from the dash cam and a description of the burner text. Leah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "If this is real, he's already buying time with lawyers." Nathan said, "Then stop looking at the calendar and start looking at the road." Leah did not promise allegiance. She promised caution, which Nathan actually trusted more. Back at the cabin, Elena asked the question nobody liked. "If we go public now, does he get arrested?" Hannah shook her head. "Not fast enough, and rich men know how to survive the space between evidence and consequence." Nathan added, "He thinks you're contained. Let him keep thinking that a little longer." Elena wheeled herself to the window after that and stared at the ridge until dark. When she finally turned back, something had changed in her expression. Fear remained. Pain remained. But humiliation was starting to turn into anger, and anger, Nathan knew, was often the first useful thing a wounded person found after surviving. The mountain taught recovery by inches. Elena learned that before she learned anything else. Hannah put her through brutal, careful exercises every morning. Assisted range of motion, controlled weight transfer, muscle activation so the right leg would not disappear entirely while it healed. At first, Elena hated all of it. The brace felt like a public admission. The wheelchair felt worse. But Nathan was building things outside. And the steady sound of work altered the emotional weather of the cabin. He measured the front steps, cut lumber, and built a ramp solid enough to take ice, melt, and hard use. He widened the porch path and packed snow down where the ground dipped. Elena watched from inside until he finished, then stared at the ramp in a way that told Hannah she understood exactly what it meant. Nathan had not made a speech. He had not told her to be strong. He had simply looked at an obstacle and decided it should not stay one. That afternoon, he wheeled her out into thin, cold sunlight for the first time since the crash. The valley below was white and endless. Elena inhaled like a woman surfacing after being held under. "You did all that this morning?" she asked. Nathan shrugged. "Wood listens better than people." The line almost made her laugh. It surprised them both. Once movement became possible, thought followed. Elena contacted Owen Mercer, the family attorney Adrian had been unable to remove completely, because Owen trusted paperwork more than charm. Nathan set up the call on a secure line Hannah brought from town. Owen's face appeared on the laptop, lined with fatigue and anger. He had been stonewalled from every direction since the reported death. He confirmed that Adrian was invoking emergency clauses to assume operational control of Elena's holdings and foundation board seats, all while publicly performing grief. He also confirmed something else. If Elena appeared alive without airtight evidence, Adrian would pivot instantly and claim she had suffered trauma, delusion, or manipulation by some opportunistic local veteran trying to extort the family. Money did not just buy defense, it bought narrative. That meant the case had to be finished before it was revealed. Nathan turned to the part he understood best. Weak links. Milo Greer, the driver, had disappeared after giving a rehearsed statement to investigators and then taking leave for emotional distress. Men like Adrian thought employees were either loyal or disposable. Men like Nathan knew they were often both, until fear shifted. The clue came from the ravine phone data Sheriff Carter quietly passed along through Hannah. One contact number repeated calls to a rural gas station and repair stop outside town. Nathan went there with Coddy at dusk, parked behind the pumps, and spent 30 minutes saying nothing while he drank coffee that tasted like burnt wire. Finally, a teenager working the register mentioned a nervous man in chauffeur clothes who had been buying prepaid cards and windshield fluid with shaking hands for 3 days. The kid pointed toward a trailer lot past the river. Milo Greer was there, looking less like a conspirator than a man discovering too late what kind of employer he had served. Nathan did not kick the door. He knocked. Coddy stood beside him like a silent legal argument. Milo opened the trailer holding a revolver low and badly. The gun dropped when he saw the dog. "I never meant for her to live through the fall," he said, before Nathan even spoke. It was a terrible sentence, but it was the sentence of a man already falling apart. Milo confessed in pieces over 2 hours and 1 cigarette he could barely keep lit. Adrian had told him the car only needed to go off-road enough to create an accident, that the safety systems would be disabled, that Elena would be unconscious from a prescribed anti-anxiety medication slipped into her champagne before the departure. Milo had been paid half in advance and promised the rest through an offshore account. When the car rolled farther than expected, Adrian ordered him to disappear, then sent new men to verify Elena's death. Milo never saw the body. That omission had eaten him alive. Sheriff Carter took Milo into quiet custody that night. Not publicly, not yet. She began building warrants through a judge she trusted. Elena, meanwhile, changed in ways no headline could have imagined. She stopped talking like a victim being moved from room to room, and started talking like the rightful owner of her own life. She reviewed company records. She flagged shell entities Adrian had introduced. She pointed out which trustees were cowards, which were greedy, and which might still irredeemable if shown proof before cameras found them. The cabin table filled with folders, maps, and handwritten notes. Hannah joked that the place now looked less like a hideout and more like a war room run by people with mismatched specialties. Nathan did not joke much, but one night he told Elena she looked more dangerous with legal pads than most men did with guns. "Good," she said. He underestimated the wrong skill set. Coddy had his own opinion about progress. He began choosing Elena's side of the room when the fire burned low. He nudged his head under her hand when pain made her go quiet. Once, after Hannah left for town and Nathan returned from the shed, he found Elena asleep in the wheelchair, with her hand resting on Coddy's neck, and the dog refusing to move enough to wake her. Nathan stood in the doorway longer than he meant to. Elena woke and saw him. Neither spoke. That silence felt different from the others, less defended, more dangerous in a better way. The next evening brought the argument that finished changing their dynamic. Elena wanted to appear publicly as soon as the driver's statement was recorded. Nathan said waiting increased the odds of getting Adrian on multiple counts, not just attempted murder. Elena shot back that every day hidden made her feel as if Adrian still controlled the shape of her life. Nathan told her anger was useful, but timing mattered. Elena snapped that he talked like timing had never cost him anyone. The words landed too hard. Nathan's face closed. For 3 seconds, Hannah thought she had just broken the fragile truce beyond repair. Then Nathan said quietly, "Timing cost me plenty. That's why I'm not gambling yours." Elena looked down first. "I'm sorry," she said. Nathan took a breath. The kind men take when they would rather retreat but choose not to. "No," he answered. "You're scared. Scared people reach for sharp things." After that, the truth between them got cleaner. Elena stopped trying to perform toughness. Nathan stopped pretending this was just logistics. By the time the chapter closed, the legal case was tightening. Milo Greer's full statement was being prepared. Adrian's investigators were missing men and asking louder questions. And Elena Brooks, in a wheelchair on a mountain ridge, had made the most important decision of her life. She was done hiding. The next time Adrian saw her, it would be where everyone else could see him too. Adrian announced Elena's memorial as if he were unveiling a monument to his own restraint. The event would take place at the Blackstone Mountain Hotel, a resort ballroom built for winter galas, board retreats, and expensive sorrow. There would be a charitable dedication in Elena's name, a statement from the family foundation, a private reception for trustees and press, and, tucked inside the legal sequencing, a formal acknowledgement of interim control over the Brooks Trust assets. Owen Mercer sent the invitation to the cabin with one line attached. "If he has built a stage, perhaps let him stand on it." Elena read the card twice, then looked at Nathan. "That's where it ends," she said. Nathan did not agree immediately. Ending things in public required more than courage. It required timing, controlled access, law enforcement alignment, protected evidence, and a way to prevent Adrian from spinning shock into victimhood. Sheriff Carter, once she finally saw the full recovered dashcam footage and Milo Greer's signed statement, committed fully. Quiet warrants were prepared. The burner phone tied one private security contractor to Adrian's office. Financial records showed payment channels moving through a shell consulting firm. Hannah documented the sedative findings with chain of custody discipline. Owen lined up trustees who would turn the second they understood Adrian was finished. Still, none of that mattered if Elena froze under the lights, or if Adrian got to her first. So preparation became its own chapter of survival. Nathan drilled routes, exits, and contingencies like planning an extraction. He practiced moving Elena's wheelchair through narrow spaces, over carpet edges, into elevators, through service hallways. He measured how fast Coddy responded to a redirect in crowded environments. He ran the dog through controlled distractions, food smells, sudden applause from recorded audio, movement near the chair, command response under stress. Coddy adapted with the sharp intelligence Nathan had always trusted. Elena trained too. Hannah insisted on stamina work because public confrontation while injured had its own physical cost. Elena practiced speaking from the chair without sounding rushed by pain. Owen rehearsed the legal sequence. Sheriff Carter coordinated deputies in plain clothes. The burner phone data produced one last gift. Adrian's security chief arranged a retrieval 2 days before the memorial, likely hoping to seize Elena before the event and replace her with another story. Nathan almost expected it. He and Coddy had just driven Elena home from a discreet imaging appointment when a dark SUV slid onto the forest road behind them. Another appeared ahead around a bend. The road was narrow, slick with refrozen runoff, and lined by pines thick enough to hide bad decisions. Nathan saw the trap half a second before the first vehicle accelerated. He did not panic. He cut the wheel just enough to fake losing the lane, let the front vehicle commit to the block, then dropped the truck into a shallow maintenance turnout he had noticed on the way down. The pursuing SUV overcorrected on ice and clipped the snowbank hard. The impact bought seconds. Nathan used them. He told Elena to lock low in the cab, sent Coddy out the passenger side with a hand signal, and stepped into the road with the same cold focus he had carried into uglier places than this. The confrontation was short and ugly. One man came fast and confident until Coddy hit him from the side and drove him into the ditch. Another swung wide for the passenger door and found Nathan there first. By the time Sheriff Carter's deputies arrived, called from the dead man's signal Nathan had sent the moment he spotted the block, one attacker was unconscious, another had a broken wrist, and a third was trying to explain why he carried zip ties and a suppressor. The road ambush changed the legal math. Now Adrian was not just the architect of a murder attempt and a fraud. He was the center of an active, continuing conspiracy. Elena listened to the deputies inventory the evidence and grew calmer rather than more frightened. "He's getting sloppy," she said. Nathan answered, "No. He's getting desperate." The night before the memorial, Elena stayed at a discreet safe house arranged by Sheriff Carter rather than risk the cabin. Hannah helped her choose clothes not as costume, but as strategy. No bridal white, no morning black. They settled on a tailored navy coat over a cream blouse, simple earrings, clean lines, and a chair polished but unadorned. "You don't need drama," Hannah said while adjusting the brace. "You are the drama." Elena smiled for the first time that day. In another room, Nathan checked Coddy's collar, settled the dog, and stood for a long time looking at his own reflection in the mirror. He still looked like the man from the mountain. Uniform, boots, sharp jaw, eyes that gave away less than most people liked. But he no longer looked like a man hiding. Elena found him there after Hannah stepped out. "You can still walk away," she said. Nathan shook his head. "Too late for that." She studied him. "I brought violence into your life." He answered with the bluntness she had come to trust. "You brought truth into a place built for lies. Violence followed it. Not the same thing." When they arrived at the Blackstone service entrance the following evening, the sky was dropping new snow over the town, and camera vans lined the front drive. Through the hotel walls, they could already hear the muffled shape of orchestral music and polished grief. Adrian Vale was inside, believing the room belonged to him. Nathan stood beside Elena's chair, Coddy at heel, and waited for Sheriff Carter's text. Across town, Owen Mercer was seating the trustees. Milo Greer was being held in a secured vehicle nearby. Hannah held the toxicology packet in a folder thicker than some lives deserved. The message arrived at 6:41 p.m., stage live. Nathan set one hand lightly on the wheelchair handles. Elena exhaled once and said, "Let's ruin his evening." They moved into the corridor toward the ballroom doors, not like victims creeping toward revenge, but like witnesses arriving on time. The ballroom was all white roses, votive candles, polished silver, and curated heartbreak. Giant black and white photographs of Elena Brooks glowed on suspended screens above the stage. Elena at charity events. Elena on horseback as a teenager. Elena smiling at some foundation opening Adrian had insisted on attending. At the podium, Adrian Vale wore grief like a tailored garment. He spoke in a low, deliberate voice about love, loss, legacy, and the responsibility to continue Elena's philanthropic vision. Reporters leaned forward. Trustees nodded with damp eyes. Society donors dabbed at tissues. Sheriff Carter's deputies in plain clothes remained scattered through the room like punctuation marks most people never noticed. Owen Mercer sat near the front with an expression of perfect legal boredom. Hannah waited off stage left beside a technician who had already been instructed exactly when to kill the memorial slideshow. At the rear service corridor, Elena heard every word through the cracked door and felt something inside her go unnaturally still. "He's good," she whispered. Nathan did not soften the truth. "He's practiced." Adrian reached the line Owen had predicted he would use, the line that linked Elena's memory to interim stewardship and future continuity. That was the cue. Nathan pushed the chair forward. Coddy moved beside them, silent, ears high, gaze locked. The ballroom doors opened. At first, only the nearest guests noticed. One woman turned, frowned, and froze so completely her champagne glass nearly tipped. Then heads began to pivot in sequence down the central aisle. The music stumbled to a stop. Adrian looked up from the podium, saw the wheelchair, saw the woman sitting in it, and for the first time that evening became utterly uncomposed. Elena Brooks rolled into the center of her own memorial, wearing navy instead of white, pale but unmistakably alive, her back straight, her hands steady on the wheels. Nathan walked beside her in green camouflage and black boots, the mountain made human. Coddy glided at heel like a blade. The cameras found them almost instantly. Shutters snapped. Someone whispered, "My God." Adrian's face emptied, then tried to rebuild itself. "Elena," he said into the microphone, voice breaking in a way that might have looked convincing if horror had not arrived a half-second too soon. This is incredible. She's alive." "Yes," Elena said, her voice carrying farther than Adrian expected. "And that seems to be the one outcome you didn't plan for." The room shifted. You could feel it physically, like floorboards adjusting under weight. Nathan positioned the chair at the foot of the stage and stepped slightly aside without ever leaving Elena exposed. Coddy sat beside the wheel, muscles still, gaze fixed on Adrian and the two security men beginning to calculate distance. Elena asked the technician for the screen. The memorial photos vanished. The first dashcam frame appeared instead. The interior of the wedding car, the snow road, her blurred reflection in the glass. Adrian started down from the podium. Sheriff Carter stood and said, "Stay where you are." It was not shouted. It did not need to be. Hannah took the microphone long enough to identify herself, identify the toxicology findings, and state chain of custody. Then Elena took it back. She told the room about the locked doors, the sedation, the remote, the ravine, and waking in a cabin because a man she had never met chose decency when her husband chose calculation. The footage played in full. Adrian's SUV appeared in the side mirror. His hand lifted. The remote flashed in the light. The ballroom made a sound no elegant room ever wants to make. Collective revulsion. One of the trustees actually sat down on the floor because his knees gave out. Adrian tried the only move left to men like him. He smiled without warmth and said, Elena was traumatized, manipulated, unstable after injury, a pawn in some extortion attempt. That lasted until Sheriff Carter signaled the ballroom entrance and Milo Greer was brought in under escort. The driver looked at the crowd, looked at Adrian, and whatever remained of his loyalty died in public. "He paid me," Milo said. "He said she'd already signed everything. He said it just had to look like weather." Adrian's security detail began edging outward. Coddy noticed first. The dog rose without a sound and took one deliberate step that stopped the nearer guard cold. Nathan didn't need to touch him. The control between man and dog was obvious enough to warn everyone watching that the next move mattered. Adrian made it anyway. He turned not toward the exits, but toward Elena, perhaps still thinking fear would split the room and create chaos. Nathan stepped between them so fast, most cameras caught only the ending. Adrian halted, Coddy cutting hard across the angle, deputies closing from both sides. Sheriff Carter already reading charges while reporters surged and security lost all allegiance. Adrian shoved once in pure animal panic. Nathan did not retaliate theatrically. He contained him, drove him off balance, and gave Carter's deputies the clean arrest they needed. Handcuffs clicked under chandelier light, while questions detonated from every direction. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, kidnapping conspiracy, financial crimes to follow. Adrian kept saying Elena's name as if saying it enough times might restore his version of reality. It did not. Outside, patrol lights stained the snow blue and red. Inside, Owen Mercer was already speaking to trustees, freezing accounts, halting interim transfers, and placing emergency protections around the foundation. Elena remained in the chair at the center of it all, suddenly exhausted, suddenly aware that surviving privately and being seen publicly were not the same strain on the body. Nathan crouched beside her, so the cameras could not hear. "You did it." Elena looked past him to the hotel doors where Adrian was being taken away, and shook her head once. "We did it." Sheriff Carter later told the press only what needed saying, that a conspiracy had been interrupted, that the victim had survived. That evidence would speak louder than performance. But the image that ran across the state by midnight was not Adrian in cuffs, though that one came close. It was Elena Brooks in a wheelchair under the hotel lights, one hand resting on Coddy's head, Nathan Cole standing beside them with the unreadable face of a man who had pulled truth out of a ravine and carried it into a ballroom. For the first time since the wedding, Elena felt the future return in a form that did not terrify her. It was not neat. Her knee still hurt. Trials still lay ahead. Recovery would still be slow. But Adrian no longer controlled the story. The night belonged to the living. Victory turned out not to feel triumphant at first. It felt quiet. Adrian's arrest triggered weeks of legal aftershocks, statements, filings, interviews, frozen accounts, emergency motions, and the slow, patient machinery by which institutions pretend they were never fooled. Elena returned to the cabin because the cabin was the one place in the world where nothing asked her to perform survival for anyone else. The mountain was changing too. Winter began to crack open. Snow slid from the roof in heavy sheets. Dark ground reappeared in strips between the pines. Water ran down the ravine in silver veins where the crash had happened. Hannah came and went with medical updates, exercise bans, warnings about overconfidence, and the kind of friendship that allowed silence without awkwardness. Owen Mercer drove up twice with documents restoring Elena's control over the company and restructuring part of the foundation into a fund for survivors of coercive abuse and financial control. Elena signed every page with steady hands. "Make sure it reaches small towns too," she told Owen. "Not just cities people like to write about." Nathan repaired fence posts flattened by weather, replaced boards on the woodshed, and found himself increasingly aware that the cabin no longer sounded the way it had before Elena. There was another coffee mug on the counter some mornings, another voice at dusk. The light from the bedroom reached the hall longer into the night. None of it felt intrusive. That was what unsettled him most. He had built his grief into architecture and routine, and now life was moving through it again as if the house had been waiting. Coddy adapted faster than either human. The Malinois developed a new habit of carrying Elena's crutch strap in his mouth when she practiced standing, as if he had personally appointed himself physical therapy assistant and emotional supervisor. The first time Elena managed 3 full supported steps on the porch, Coddy pranced so proudly Nathan actually laughed out loud. The sound surprised all 3 of them. Elena looked over her shoulder and smiled in a way that had nothing to do with relief and everything to do with recognition. She was seeing the man under the reserve, the one still capable of warmth when he forgot to defend against it. One evening they hiked, slowly, carefully, to an overlook above the valley. Elena used crutches and a brace. Nathan stayed half a step away without hovering, and Coddy ranged ahead then circled back whenever the terrain changed. The light was going gold over the pines. Patches of old snow remained in the shadows, but spring had won the argument. Elena asked about the woman whose absence still lived in the cabin, even though no one named it often. Nathan told her about Kate with more detail than he had shared in years, how she loved rock strata and bad coffee, how she thought mountains made honest company, how they built the cabin together board by board after his last deployment, because both of them were tired of rooms full of noise. He admitted that after Kate died, he stayed in the mountains because leaving would have felt like losing her twice. Elena listened without rushing him past any sentence. When he finished, she said, "You didn't hide here because you were weak. You came here because you loved something enough to protect what was left of it." Nathan looked at the valley for a long time. "Maybe," he said. Then he added, "And maybe you came back because you wanted to live as yourself for the first time." That was the closest thing either of them had said to naming what was growing between them. They did not force it after that. They let it gather in ordinary moments, her hand reaching automatically for his sleeve on uneven ground, him leaving the porch light on before she even asked, Coddy choosing to sleep where both of them were visible. By late spring, the cabin had become less a hideout than a home in active revision. Elena ordered nothing luxurious except practical improvements Nathan could not argue with. Better insulation in the north wall, a safer shower rail, a more durable ramp, orthopedic equipment. Hannah approved. And one absurdly expensive dog bed Coddy ignored in favor of the old rug by the fire. The day Elena took her first unsupported step from the porch rail to Nathan's waiting hand, the valley below was bright with new grass, and the last snow sat only on the highest peaks. She nearly lost balance halfway through and laughed instead of panicking. Nathan closed the distance without making it a rescue. That mattered to her. She was not falling into dependence. She was walking toward a future. Months earlier, he had carried her from a ravine in a torn wedding dress. Now she crossed 3 sunlit boards under her own power, while Coddy trotted ahead like a tiny parade marshal. "Again," she said when she reached him. "Doctor's orders?" Nathan asked. "No," Elena replied, breathless and smiling. "Mine." Later that night they ate on the porch while the sky went blue-black over the ridge. No cameras, no trustees, no lawyers, no memorials, just the sound of insects returning, the faint clink of dishes, and the dog sleeping at their feet. Elena told Nathan she could go back east now if she wanted. The company was under control. The foundation was in better hands. The trial would come, and she would testify, but she no longer needed to run her life from fear. Nathan asked if she wanted to go. Elena looked out at the mountain and said, "Not tonight." It was a simple answer, and maybe the most honest one she had ever given. Nathan reached for her hand with the hesitancy of a man relearning something sacred. She let him take it. The future did not descend on them all at once with dramatic music and certainty. It arrived the way healing usually does, through repeated choices, practical mercy, laughter returning where silence used to live, and a dog who believed from the start that broken things were still worth guarding. By summer, the cabin porch no longer held the shape of a stranger's rescue. It held the shape of a family being built carefully, gratefully, and in full view of the mountains that had once only witnessed loss. Sometimes the miracle is not a thunderbolt from heaven, but the quiet moment when God refuses to let evil have the final word. A stranger stops on a dangerous road. A loyal dog senses what human eyes would miss. A wounded heart finds the courage to stand again. In everyday life, grace often looks ordinary until the damage it prevents becomes clear. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who still believes truth matters. Leave a comment about the moment that stayed with you most, and subscribe to K9 and Seal Stories. May God bless you, protect your home, and bring light to every place in your life that still feels cold.